Hello, I'm James Milan with Arlington Public News, and I'm here this morning to talk with Town Counsel Douglas Heim about the anticipated proposal that we have all been hearing about relating to the Mugar property, and more generally to talk about the 40B process that may be involved with developments on that property. So Doug, thanks so much for coming in to talk with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
And this is a complicated issue for most of us. I would love it if you could just give us some grounding in what the 40B process is. We hear that term thrown around quite a bit, but I'm not sure if even I, for sure, and our viewing audience fully understand exactly what that entails. So if you wouldn't mind, just take us through what the steps of a 40B process would be.
Of course, and I'll just start out with the caveat that the 40B process is complicated and there are a lot of different pieces that may not apply to every situation. It's a fairly context-specific process. But generally, the Comprehensive Permit Act, Chapter 40B, was passed in 1969 for the purposes of encouraging construction of affordable housing. And the idea was to provide some means by which the unintended consequences, or mostly unintended consequences, of a lot of local regulations, including zoning, were making it difficult for developers to create affordable housing throughout the state. So the two primary means by which Chapter 40B is supposed to address those issues and concerns is, one, it allows a developer to submit a single comprehensive permit application that's supposed to satisfy most, if not all, of the local regulations within a town. The one that we think of most is zoning, but there are others as well. The second is that it allows the zoning authority, in Arlington's case, the Zoning Board of Appeals, to override some of the local regulations that might make it difficult or impossible to really create affordable housing within a given municipality. They don't have to, but it gives them the option to do that. So
I'm sorry,
yeah.
I just want to clarify. So the purpose, of course, then, as you say, is to avoid the impact of inadvertent consequences of local regulation kind of being a disincentive for affordable housing.
Yeah, I guess
so you want to increase the opportunity for that. So you want a local zoning board to be able to, in certain cases, not have to abide by the regulations. Or
yeah,
is that a bad way to put that?
I think maybe the idea, sort of most neutrally stated, is that it was supposed to provide more flexibility for local zoning authorities to help encourage the development of affordable housing by relaxing some of the what can be expensive, not in every case, but what can be expensive local regulations. So when a developer basically wants to create a project that is going to include affordable housing, and it should be noted that not all the housing has to be affordable in any given 40B project. It's only a certain percentage. But when a developer wants to create a 40B development, the first step is for them to essentially apply to the state for what's called project eligibility. And they've just had to provide certain information that shows that their project falls within the sort of rubric of what 40B is intended to accomplish. And then the state, in our case most likely the Department of Housing and Community Development, would notify our Board of Selectmen that they've received a request for a project eligibility letter and provide the Board of Selectmen to provide some comment on that. So that's usually the first step. Once a project eligibility letter is issued, that's when the 40B application is ripe to be filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay. And just to clarify, regarding the Mugar property, that first step has not even yet been taken?
To my knowledge, I don't know whether or not the folks who are developing the Mugar property or proposing to develop the Mugar property, Oak Tree development. I don't know whether they've applied for a project eligibility letter yet, but I know that the Board of Selectmen has not yet been notified by the Department of Housing and Community Development that they're seeking comment on that project's eligibility.
Okay, so we're very, very early in this process that we are conjecturing about, but has not yet in any official sense begun.
That's right. It's my understanding that the folks at Oak Tree have notified the town that they do intend at some point in time to pursue a comprehensive permit. But again, none of the formal steps, at least to our knowledge, have been taken yet. And until that happens, it's not premature to talk about these things, because I think it's important to recognize that one of the things that everybody should be thinking about, not just in the context of a potential application for a comprehensive permit, but generally is the type of planning that our planning department's constantly engaged in with respect to creating affordable housing, maintaining the balance between open space, and other sort of needs and concerns in Arlington. In fact, at town meeting, one of the things that came up was the master plan. And one of the pieces of evidence that can be probative in determining whether a comprehensive permit application should be granted or not granted is whether or not the proposed project is consistent with the town's plans. And so the master plan did have a certain position with respect to that Mugar property, and that position has been in the development for the past 2 years. Mm-hmm. So all of these issues are not just issues that are coming up because the folks at Oak Tree may be filing a 40B application with us. They're issues that the folks in Town Hall are always thinking about, and a lot of residents are thinking about, and a lot of committees and commissions devote their time to trying to make sure that we've got the right balance here in Arlington. I know that the Arlington Housing Corporation and a lot of other folks do important work in trying to foster affordable housing here in Arlington, completely separate from this Oak Tree process.
Yeah. Can I ask one other question just to clarify something that you said?
Of course.
And that is, you had mentioned that not all of a proposed project would need to be affordable housing. You said just a certain percentage would be. Yes. Is that a set percentage, or is that dependent, is it context specific?
It is a set, well, there's a couple of different percentages. I'm sorry, I don't recall off the top of my head what the percentage would likely be in this scenario. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're only talking about a certain percentage, and that's set by state regulations and law.
Okay, thanks.
So whether we're talking about the Oak Tree potential project or any other 40B project, the next stage is for the actual comprehensive permit application to be submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the Zoning Board of Appeals
that's a local authority?
That's our local zoning authority that would hear a comprehensive permit application under Chapter 40B. So the Zoning Board of Appeals must and will consider the application on its merits. And in that sense, they have to act completely independently from the rest of the town. Once the application comes in, the application will contain a lot of information. They're allowed to seek further information that they think is integral to evaluating the project. But they'll also be inviting in a lot of the boards and commissions and other bodies that would ordinarily be required to issue a permit so that they can have input from them. They'll certainly be wanting to hear from folks in the community. And the types of things that they're going to be considering, in addition to affordable housing and the overall nature of the project, are things like environmental impact, impact on open space, impact on health, safety. Those are the types of things that they need to make sure that they thoroughly vet, so that if at the end of the hearing process, which is a lengthy process, they can issue a written decision that fully accounts for the range of things that they should be considering. And they really have three options when they sort of finally reach that end result. They can approve the comprehensive permit application. They can reject it summarily.
Just outright. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Or they can approve it with conditions. And those conditions can be fairly substantial. They could approve it with requiring some form of mitigation if there are certain concerns about environmental impacts or water and sewer impacts. They might require them to do certain things aesthetically that would help the project fit in with fit into the sort of community in a certain way. But those are really the three options. Now, if a developer doesn't agree with the decision or doesn't think the decision is appropriate, at that point in time, what I think a lot of people are thinking about in terms of Chapter 40B is the developer has the right to pursue an appeal with the Housing Appeals Committee, which is a state body. And they can appeal it either a rejection or an approval with conditions. And at that point in time, it becomes an even more formal hearing process where evidence is going to be weighed. There's the opportunity for direct and cross-examination of witnesses, and that can be a challenging forum for municipalities. I wouldn't say by any stretch of the imagination that an appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee is per se going to go against the town, but more often than not, Housing Appeals
Looking
Committee.
at the historical record, that's how it has
That's right.
more often come out.
That is the reality. So it's certainly not a foregone conclusion that the Housing Appeals Committee will overturn the decision of the ZBA, but it is certainly a concern that it's that towns have had a limited amount of success getting the Housing Appeals Committee to support their decisions.
So folks in Arlington who would be the decision makers in this kind of process are going to be aware of that historical record, I assume, and therefore it's going to be particularly important, I would think, for them to either try and avoid the situation of an appeal or have some kind of leverage within that. And as I understand it, 40B gives the town some leverage in terms of there are a couple of conditions, if I understand correctly, that if they pertain, the developer would not be able to appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee. Is that right?
So there's two circumstances under which the sort of right of appeal is foreclosed. One of which is mostly not going to be an option for Arlington. One means by which a town can basically render themselves, it's maybe a strong word, but immune from the Housing Appeals Committee having oversight over the ZBA's decision, is to have 10% of its housing stock designated as affordable housing. Now, it's my understanding that that's extremely unlikely to be the case in Arlington anytime soon. I don't know the specific number. The other possibility is that if 1.5% of the town's zoned residential, commercial, and industrial land area is occupied by appropriate affordable housing units, that also can be the basis by which an appeal is effectively cut off. Now, I don't know whether the town is at what the town's number is right now, and my understanding is that the planning department and the folks in town hall are doing their due diligence to make sure that they've got the right numbers, and at some point I'm sure that they'll have that information for the public.
Right. I mean, at this point, they're trying to figure that out because they're aware that that's going to be an important consideration.
Yeah, and I should say that it's not something that they're not sort of constantly sort of thinking about and aware of generally, but at this point in time, because of the importance of making sure that we've got everything precise at this juncture with this potential 40B coming down the pike, I know that they're recalculating and making sure they've got the right numbers.
Mm-hmm. And I know that, again, and I think it's probably clear to our audience, as it is to me, simply listening to you quite lucidly go through this, that it is a very complicated process and with a lot of contingencies in there. I have heard that the town has, in fact, retained outside counsel to support you and the town itself in their efforts in this process. Can you tell us something about that?
In any situation like this, where and again, this is not just about Oak Tree, there's potential for other 40B applications, which could be coming within the next year or so. We want to make sure that the town is appropriately resourced. So we've retained a special counsel in this case, John Whitten and his firm Whitten and Huggins, to help make sure that both the specific bodies that have significant responsibilities, most significantly the ZBA, but also the Conservation Commission and other folks who will really need to have specialized and dedicated supplemental legal resources available to them, will have that type of counsel as they need it. Mr. Whitten and I will be working together, although we'll serve in different roles. While I'm the town's counsel and I can provide sort of general legal resources, it's important, again, in this instance, where it's very important to make sure that we have not only the adequate sort of volume of legal resources available, we have a fairly small legal department, but we also have the ability for folks like the Zoning Board of Appeals to have someone dedicated specifically to them.
Right, and this is, he and his firm, I assume, are experts in this area.
That's right.
This is
So
what they do.
Yeah, that's right. So there's this is an area of law that there's definitely a specialized area of practice. So Mr. Whitten is a zoning expert, and even more specifically within the realm of zoning, a 40B expert. And his experience and knowledge in this area is really invaluable to the town.
So I wanted to wind back to something that we discussed maybe 5-10 minutes ago, but that was where you were talking about how the Zoning Board of Appeals, should the application come in, will then start a process of consulting with and getting input from a number of different town bodies. And then you also mentioned, and I think this is important to our viewers for sure, that they will solicit input from residents, from the town's populace. Do you have any sense of how that would come about? How will people
Sure.
have an opportunity to weigh in on
So
this?
I mean, that's going to be somewhat to the discretion of the Zoning Board of Appeals, but these are going to be, open meetings, and there's going to be opportunities for folks to basically express their concerns. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because again, we're still very, very, very early in the process, and there are sort of local model rules for how to conduct these hearings. But what I can say with confidence is that there should be ample opportunities, both within that very specific context of the Zoning Board of Appeals public hearings on the comprehensive permit application, and generally for folks to advocate for their positions, to ask questions, to try to assert the types of information that they think is important to receive before the ZBA makes any decision. And I'm confident that that if anything, it will be incumbent on folks who want to try to make sure that their voices are heard. It'll be incumbent on them to try to make sure that their messages are focused before the ZBA, so that they can make sure the ZBA is hearing the most salient points. Because I do think one of the challenges is there's going to be a tremendous volume of information and a tremendous number of points of view on these things. So I would encourage folks to make sure that they participate actively, both within the context of the hearing and beforehand, during the process, in other ways, so that they can make their positions known in as comprehensive a fashion as possible.
Yes, in fact, on that note, before the application is even in, as we have already noted, and bears repeating, Oak Tree is in fact going to be hosting on Thursday, May 21st at the Hardy School an information session, a public outreach, in which I assume they are going to want to both outline some ideas or prospects perhaps, and then perhaps be getting feedback from those in attendance at that point. So clearly, most people are aware that there, as you have alluded to, there are going to be both vociferous and broad, a vociferous and broad range of opinions should this project move forward.
Yeah, so I think it's always a good thing when there are more opportunities for the public to be able to express their position on something, especially as potentially impactful as a major residential development in East Arlington. So I'll be curious to hear what they have to say and what members of the public have to say at that point too. Again, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I should also note that the Zoning Board of Appeals isn't the only body that will need to make some determinations with respect to certain types of 40B projects. I don't want to, again, put the cart before the horse, but the Zoning Boards of Appeals and the comprehensive permit is only meant to address local regulations. There are certain bodies in town that basically derive their regulatory authority from the state. So the Conservation Commission and the Board of Health are the ones that jump out to me the most as having duties and authorities, and there being requirements that any developer has to meet with respect to going before those bodies that are separate from the ZBA process. So the comprehensive permit does not address everything. It also doesn't mean that the building inspector doesn't have to go through and make sure that everything meets state building code. All of those things still have to be done and are going to be done either parallel to or after the comprehensive permit process. I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. But so all those things will be happening, and so there's going to be a couple of different opportunities for the public to address Oak Tree, to address the ZBA, and I'll be as interested as anybody to see what some of the dialogue yields.
Yeah, the vast majority of what we've been talking about today, and again, it has been largely in general terms because that's all we have, is talking about the 40B process, which we had, made clear relates to affordable housing. But there are other aspects of the Mugar property that have gotten people's attention and that definitely people are exercised about. Environmental, wetlands, et cetera. With the caveat that there's no reason why you should be an expert on either the history or the composition of the property in any great detail. I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit about what that may mean, the fact that there are environmental concerns as well as affordable housing issues at play here?
Sure. Well, I think that I would anticipate that the Oak Tree folks will want to be at least talking about some of those things as well at their information session or outreach session or whatever it is on Thursday night. But the site has been in the condition it's in for quite some time. A lot of the site is probably indisputably undevelopable, and I think there might be some dispute about the portions that they may want to develop or may not. But it's my understanding that the site's been in the Mugar family for quite some time, that it may have been impacted by the construction of Route 2 at one point in time, and that one of the chief areas of the public's concern is flooding in East Arlington, which is already a problem, and that I think folks will really need to be convinced is not going to be exacerbated by this project. So that's one of the primary sort of concerns that I think will come up over time, in addition to sort of general sort of wetlands concerns and environmental concerns, whether or not this project will help, hurt, or have no impact on flooding. I also think that there's a couple other sort of common sense issues that I expect will come up throughout this, such as the traffic concerns in that area are already fairly substantial, and so we've already heard from the public at town meeting that those are all things that are on people's minds. So when the application comes in, if it does come in, I expect them to address those types of things and be curious to see what they have to say. And I'm sure that they'll probably do it before then as well in this informational session. But those are all going to be part of the calculus that's going to have to be balanced with the importance of affordable housing in a community like Arlington.
Certainly, we have asked you a number of questions, and you've spoken both at length and as I said before, quite lucidly about the various issues involved here. Just wanted to give you an opportunity, though, before we sign off, to let us know whether there's anything else that we haven't yet covered today that you wanted to make sure that the public would know.
Well, I appreciate that opportunity. I think I think the key things that I'd like to make sure that everybody is aware of that sometimes are modest misconceptions that folks have. Or again, the things that we've already talked about, that there's a sort of process to the 40B application, that Zoning Board of Appeals here and everywhere else has some discretion to decide whether a project is appropriate or not appropriate, or whether it can be made appropriate with certain conditions, and that's what we will be focused on as the town's government. What happens in the Housing Appeals Committee, if it comes to that, yeah, should it get to that, is obviously something that we'll be thinking about and want to make sure that there's a really solid decision, whether it's I mean, obviously, it probably wouldn't be appealed if it was approved, but that the ZBA will, have to weigh the evidence and make a decision based on the merits of these proposals. But whatever happens, I think that their focus will be on getting the decision right, and not being overly worried that the Housing Appeals Committee will do whatever it wants, because there's certainly instances where municipalities have gone to the Housing Appeals Committee and had their decisions upheld. It's been more often than not that it hasn't been the case. But that's one thing. Another thing that I think is important for folks to keep in mind is that not all 40B projects are the same. That it's perfectly acceptable for the town to embrace one 40B project, and the town to not feel another 40B project because of its siting, because of its impacts, because of any number of things. Doesn't work in Arlington where another one might. And even if at some point in time the town satisfies these sort of calculations, whether it's 10% affordable housing goal or the 1.5% goal, that doesn't mean that 40Bs can't exist in Arlington. It just means that we would have more control over whether our sort of approval, rejection, or approval with conditions is the final word on it, or whether the Housing Appeals Committee is really a viable venue for appeal or not. So 40B is an important tool, and I think that I've seen in the time that I've been here that folks in the government and in this community very much support affordable housing and feel like it's an important goal for this community to have. Not only is that codified in the master plan, but I think anybody who's spent time around Arlington has seen that that's been an important goal of the selectmen and a number of other bodies. Each individual case is going to be different, and we're all going to have to sort of sit tight in part, but also, in terms of the actual formal application process, but also, think carefully about what we want to see for the future of Arlington, and what projects make sense and what projects aren't tenable in Arlington. Have an open mind where we can, but also be prepared to advocate for the things that we think are important.
Well, I have to say that speaking for myself for sure, and I hope by extension for other members of the Arlington community, I do have a better understanding after talking to you this morning of what the issues are and also what the process is going to be. So appreciate it very much, you taking the time out of your busy day to come and talk to us today.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
And we hope to see you again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
For Arlington Public News and on behalf of Town Council Douglas Heim, I'm James Milan. Thanks for joining us.